But just that false dichotomy between the financial, the business decisions and the pastoral, spiritual decisions,
Mm-hmm.
that's a wall that we really continue to try and work to break down, because we think that there should not be a distinction between the two, that the best financial and business decisions are going to be made in light of what our church teaches and what believes. And the best pastoral and spiritual decisions will be informed by the practical implications of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so really trying to bridge those two, we think is a key contribution to make. And I don't know where that wall first got built, but I don't think it serves the church at all.
Welcome to the Ron Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst on the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are power for impact.
Hello and welcome to the Ron Huntley Leadership Podcast. Thanks for joining us. If you're here for the first time, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. Today, we're going to be talking about the role that business and formation plays in the Catholic Church and Catholic leaders. And our guest today is Professor Matt Manion. He's a professor of practice in the management department, and he's the faculty director for the Center of Church Management at Villanova School of Business. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you so much, Ron. Great to be here with you.
We had a wonderful conversation not all that long ago about the opportunity and how you're enjoying this whole concept of business and in the Catholic context, forming the next generation of business people at the school. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, it's so I've been at Villanova since 2017 and came here after stints. I had a stint in the for-profit world for kind of the first chapter of my career, and then had a stint in the nonprofit Catholic apostolate world, which is where we met when I was working with Catholic Leadership Institute. And then came to this role where I really just feel so blessed to be able to bring both of those together in a really unique situation. And so I have my business background and I'm able to teach, and I do teach some of our undergrad students. I teach more of our MBA students here. And then also with the work for the Center for Church Management that's specifically geared towards helping leaders in the church, we can talk more about later. But one of the things that really drew this to me after spending 18 years working exclusively in service to the Catholic Church throughout North America in the time at CLI was I did feel a sense of calling in myself to work in an environment that was not exclusively Catholic. Right. And so part of the draw here at Villanova, while our student body is 65, 70% Catholic, it's not all. Yes. And our faculty is not all Catholic. And so there was a desire to kind of, what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? What does it mean to be a Catholic witness in an environment where not everyone thinks the same thing and feels the same way? So there was a fun challenge with that in coming here. But I would say it's been so invigorating. So I teach, for MBAs, I teach team leadership and group dynamics, and I teach global business ethics are two of the primary courses I teach there. And to bring in, it's really refreshing. We are an Augustinian Catholic university, so the Augustinian friars founded our university 175 years ago and still lead the university. And Father Peter Donahue is our president. And a big part of Augustinian education, which we can share with our students, is this concept. The Augustinians say we search for truth together, and everyone has a contribution to make.
Wow.
And so be able to bring into our class that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to find the capital T truth in these situations and whatever business problems or issues we're facing, and that we all have a contribution to make to it. And so whatever your perspective, whatever your point of view might be, we need to hear that so that if we hear all these different ones, we can ultimately come to clarity about what the truth is. And to be able to teach in a Catholic business school, it's just such a gift for me, because to be able to bring in, look, you could have gone to any other school, but you're here. So we're going to share what the Catechism would say about this. We're going to share what Catholic social teaching would say about this issue. And that's a point of view that you get as a benefit of coming to this school, right, as opposed to any other school that's out there. And I would tell you, Ron, it's been extremely well received. I mean, our undergraduate students love it because it's a big part of the reason they came here. Yes. But also our grad students, again, whatever faith tradition or no faith tradition they come from, they chose to come to a school that has a commitment to a certain set of core values and a belief system. And there's an appreciation to see how that can be integrated into people's, in this case, their for-profit work or their corporate work, but that they can bring their whole self to the workplace. Not only can, but they must bring their whole self to the workplace as part of their gift to the world and to the companies for which they work. So yeah, that's a quick version of what it is, but it's been fantastic.
It's cool, and I know in a lot of the churches that I work with, they have Catholic schools, and it's not uncommon to have non-Catholics go into that school.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have parents who are intentionally making a decision to align with the values and the things that they're probably going to learn in a Catholic context. And they're perfectly fine with that. And so it must be because I'm guessing you didn't deal with too many non-Catholic churches at CLI, right? None. Exactly zero. Not the mandate. Yes. And so that would be a shift, and what a blessing that would probably be. I can see why you would enjoy that so much. It's a real challenge to be in that space again and hold great conversations with different perspectives and backgrounds in a way that is focused on reason and logic and faith. And
pursuit of truth, yeah. So I mean, we do there's a crucifix in every classroom in this building, and like that's who we are. But I also think it's fun. I think it's a real opportunity for us to teach our students that as we live in a more pluralistic, more diverse world, that you have gifts to bring too. And so that there's a way to not compromise who you are and what you believe and still work in a world where other people see things differently and can do that respectfully, but that doesn't mean you need to deny who you are. But yeah, that whole idea of everyone's got a gift to make. And I do believe we as Catholics, and particularly as Catholic business leaders, have that gift to make. And I think as whether you're Catholic or not, for all of our graduates, we really challenge them. Like, you've got a call coming out of here. Part of being a Villanovan is to be a business leader for a better world and to make a contribution to the common good. And all those things are universal.
Yes.
But also they're uniquely Catholic as well as being universal, which is the beauty of it, I think.
It probably demystifies a lot of misunderstandings about what it means to be Catholic. Yes. It's like, like they accept me, they appreciate my thought and perspectives. We're pursuing truth. Like, I don't know anybody that doesn't think truth is a good idea. You don't have to be Catholic to do that. And so I just think that's a wonderful environment to form because what types of students are coming to business school? I guess I'm going to particularly focus on your MBA or program. Like, I'm guessing those are fairly ambitious people in terms of their pursuit to make a difference, to excel in business, whether it's being a part of a corporation or starting something. What to describe to me? I know there's not one person, but would you say that there's a higher level of drive when people come to that?
No. And I do think there absolutely is. I mean, they wouldn't pursue higher education if they weren't looking to grow and expand their impact and their influence in the organizations for which they work. And so, but I think it's interesting. I've heard it described as, and part of what we try and pursue is being a business school with a soul. And so I would say that our students are competitive. And so we have a high pursuit of excellence here, and people who are really committed to being the best they can be. They're competitive without being cutthroat.
Yes.
And so there's kind of this realization that me being at my best doesn't have to come at the expense of you. And that we can actually all rise and all grow and all push each other to be our very best. And when we do that, then this world of ours is a better thing. So yeah, I would say there's people that have great drive, but also people that want to make a difference. It's not just about making a ton of money. That's kind of a byproduct of doing a job well done.
Amen. Amen. What a wonderful environment. Years ago, working in the pharmaceutical industry, I always loved it because it was really healthy competition. Yes, we wanted to grow our business and market share and everything else, but we all cared about each other, and it wasn't cutthroat, and it just made for a wonderful work environment. But I've also been in other scenarios where it's like the competitor is the enemy. Same. And it's like, let's crush them like a bug. It's like, I don't feel so good about that. I love to win as much as the next guy, but I don't want to hurt somebody. So that's going to, I imagine that type of intentionality around teaching is going to help, probably forms your culture as a school, but it's also going to impact others in the culture that they might form later on in the organizations they work in. Is that fair?
That's the hope. And there really is. We sometimes joke this thing called Nova Nation, but the culture of this university and the culture of our alums is very, very strong. We sometimes joke that it's cult-like. I mean, people really love their experience here and are really passionate about helping other Villanovans and helping the world, but helping other Villanovans. There's a small example of it, Ron, that's actually
Please.
been written up in a couple studies, but as a very small thing of the other-centeredness that's both in our students, but also imbued in our culture. Like, people don't walk through a door on this campus without turning around to see if they can hold it for the person behind them or the person coming in front of them. And it's not something that we teach explicitly, but anybody's on this campus for more than a couple of weeks just does it because that's the way. So it's little things like that that try and imbue in people. There are other humans around you, and you need to pay attention to them. And so that other-centeredness then I think gets played out into, how we try and treat each other and how we try and respect each other and the kind of citizens we're trying to form for the world once they leave here, and the ones that have that commitment to excellence, but also have that understanding that we're a part of this human family, and we have responsibilities as a part of this human family, and how we treat each other matters.
Amen. You mentioned something I want to open up a little bit in terms of the studies and research, because you guys are doing studies. You guys are taking a look at the business world and cultures and team and ethics and stuff. And so tell me a little bit about some of the research that's going on that you're finding interesting and that's making a difference. And
I would say there's probably two sides on that. Okay. And so one is the generic business research that I think is relevant for church leaders and probably has more chance for adoption perhaps than is currently happening. So like in the whole ethics space, there's this movement towards not just profits as the bottom line, but there's been talk for a number of years of like a triple bottom line of people, planets, and the profits. And so kind of balancing all those. And so companies have a responsibility. And so they have to take care of kind of what is their impact on the world, on the planet. They have to treat people right. And if they don't have an equitable workplace, they're not going to be successful long-term. And they have to make money. But I think it's a really healthy movement away from just the focus on making money and realizing there's other contributions that any organization, any corporation can make. I actually just authored an article for the Priest magazine on that very thing, on kind of how churches can adopt that triple bottom line mentality to move from a focus on just staying viable, which I think a lot of churches are. It's like, just do I have enough money to pay my expenses? And move from parish viability to parish vitality and thinking about what's the contribution we're making to the community we serve. So yes, we absolutely have to pay the bills and need to manage that sort of things. But how are we allocating our resources? How are we investing in ministry to best serve the people in our community and paying attention to, yes, our impact on the environment, but more our impact on the people in the community. So I think that piece is a really healthy shift in business, but I also think it's one that can easily be embraced by more churches to kind of balance all three of those things in some pretty fascinating ways. I also think in the literature on team leadership, there's a much greater appreciation of how crucial psychological safety is for individuals and teams to do their best work. There was Google, of all places, tried to use their great analytical skills to figure out what makes for the best team. They did this thing called Project Aristotle.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, they found it had nothing to do with the seniority of the people involved, had nothing to do with the diversity of the people involved, had nothing to do with the skill set or the level of time they begin. All the things they thought would make a difference didn't. The only thing that made a difference was if people felt psychologically safe on the team.
Wow.
And when there was a level of trust where they could throw out ideas and try things on and know that they wouldn't get attacked for it or wouldn't get punished for throwing out ideas, that they could try things and fail and still learn from it, those teams were the ones that really thrived. And where there wasn't psychological safety, then people went from a fear base and those teams didn't do what they're supposed to do. And so I think in a lot of our churches too, and I know, Ron, we've had this conversation over the years, but the importance of really high quality leadership teams where there is that deep, deep trust in people, where there is that psychological safety, that's where people do their best work. And I think that's a very Christian approach. I think that's what Jesus did better than any other leader out there, is created an atmosphere of psychological trust, of safety, of people to be their best selves. And as a result, have this great church that's continued for 2,000 years. So those are examples of two things where I think there's great wisdom in what is happening in business research that's so applicable to any organization, and particularly to our churches. So a couple things,
Yeah, I often think that, Jesus, if he had the time, he would have been a good part-time professor at your university, because
Yeah.
so often I hear people say, oh, they used to say this to me all the time, and I would never give in to it. Oh, Ron, you're that business guy that brings business principles to the church. I'm thinking, no, I'm not. Like, do you know how dysfunctional businesses can be? Are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm the business guy who brings Jesus to the business,
Yeah.
and because Jesus gave so many amazing examples of what it means to lead well and to lay your life down for others to make them great. And to me, that's
Yes.
great leadership. And,
Yes.
and that's what I try to lean into as I work with pastors and their leadership teams. It's not about your
Mhm.
position. It's about your commitment and your willingness to do whatever it takes to make people great and to glorify Jesus. Like, that's the funnest
Yes.
life of all.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I would say two things on that round too. It is interesting because we have been criticized sometimes, and I think there can be a misperception of some people that
Hmm.
like you just want us to run the church as a business, and particularly in the Center for Church Management, that side of
Sure.
our work, which is just geared towards church leaders, towards pastors, towards lay leaders in the church. Um, and our founder Chuck Zeck, when he started this back in 2004, he was always really clear. Like, look, the church is not a business, but it is an organization.
Yes.
And as leaders of that organization, we have responsibility to steward its resources in a way that is worthy of the gospel. And so we kind of say, yeah, you don't exist in order to have a good strategy or to have a good financial plan or to have good
Mhm.
human resources. That's not why the church exists, to share the good news of Jesus Christ. But when those things are done poorly, when the finances are not managed well, when people are not treated well, when there's no game plan for the future, that actually, in our experience, can serve as an inhibitor or can block the transmission of the gospel.
Amen.
So people will look at that and say, "You guys don't have your house in order. Why am I going to listen to the message you're talking about when you're so dysfunctional?" But on the flip side, when they're done well, and so when the finances are managed in a way and kind of the resources are allocated to say we're investing in these things because these are our priorities
Hmm.
as a faith community, and people can look at that and say, okay, yeah, they put their money where their mouth is. Or when they see the way they treat their people, they have good human resources policies, they
Yes.
develop and grow talent well, or they have a good strategy and plan for how they're going to impact the community. When those things are done well, they actually amplify the gospel and can be
Yeah.
an aid to its proclamation and to its transmission. So, yeah, it's not a business, but it can learn some things
Yes.
that can help the church fulfill her mission
Hmm.
more effectively. And
Well,
I think that's
yeah.
what we're trying to do there.
That's why I think you're the perfect person to be doing what you're doing, because in the years that we've known each other, I know that you're so good at this management side. Like, to be a professor in the practice of management, I think is so awesome. But you've never prioritized that over the purpose, and so I
Mhm.
just love that. You're so good at what you do because you want to have the biggest difference possible, because you want to help movements and organizations and priests and bishops have the biggest possible impact. It was never an end unto itself, and so you in that role is really cool. Like, I can
Well,
see why
I
it's
appreciate
such.
that. But yeah, it is. I think that's key, though, is to make sure that it stays a means to the end.
Mm,
And we have to keep the primary end as the primary thing. And when we do that, the rest of the stuff. I mean, the other piece is interesting on that too, Ron, from a church standpoint. Um, it's been fascinating. We did a study on when COVID first hit. So we did a study on the impact of COVID on collections, but in there also got some research on kind of how decisions were made at the diocesan level. And so there were two big decisions early in COVID in the United States. One was universal, one was specific in the United States. So one was a decision to suspend public masses when
mhm,
COVID first hit in March of 2020. And so, and then the second one for the Church of the United States, at least, was the decision for churches to apply for the payroll protection loans
mhm.
from the government, which were a huge safety net to allow the church to continue her ministry. And it was interesting because in looking at how those decisions were made, very few financial people, diocesan CFOs, very few of them were involved in the decision to suspend public mass. That was primarily the bishop, maybe the vicar general, maybe somebody from the priest council, but there were very few financial people involved in that decision, even though it has huge financial implications.
Yes,
Um, but then on the flip side, the decision to apply for the payroll protection plan loans, which is a huge decision,
big time.
there were very few pastoral people involved in that. So generally the bishop and the CFO, but like the priests weren't consulted for it, the director of pastoral ministries, even though there's the old saying that with the king's coin comes the king. So like there's big decisions about taking government money that should be thought through and discussed. And wouldn't necessarily change the decision, but just that false dichotomy between the financial, the business decisions and the pastoral, spiritual decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wall that we really continue to try and work to break down, because we think that there should not be a distinction between the two, that the best financial and business decisions are going to be made in light of what our church teaches and what believes. And the best pastoral and spiritual decisions will be informed by the practical implications of that. Mm-hmm. And so really trying to bridge those two, we think is a key contribution to make. And I don't know where that wall first got built, but I don't think it serves the church at all.
Boy, and I see it a lot too in parishes that, the finance council sometimes, and I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes can pride themselves on their lack of spirituality. It's like, no, the religious stuff we're going to leave to the priests and the other people. We're all about, brass tacks, or get down to the bottom line. It's like, hold on a minute. Like, what are you talking about? Are you a baptized Catholic or not? And if you are, wake up. Like, you're called to be just as faith-filled and on fire with the love of Christ as somebody who's running the prayer group. And so for the love of Pete, don't excuse yourself from that. Like, that'd actually be a terrible fit for the finance council, in my opinion. It's like that's a spiritual immaturity that doesn't help in making key decisions that are going to drive the future and the impact of the movement of your parish and your community. Like, that's the last thing you want is.
Well, I think it's a bit of illiteracy on both sides too, Ron, that we tried to break down. And so there's like the illiteracy and there's the cultural piece. So yes, culturally we've allowed that. Like, you guys take care of the money. I remember I had a pastor, one of my pastors many years ago, who was, when I first joined the parish, and he knew some of the work that I did, but he had a great expression. He's like, yeah, I appreciate what you do. He said, do me a favor. He said, why don't we make a deal while you're a parishioner here? He's like, you help me manage the things and make sure we can pay the bills and all, and I'll help you get to heaven. And so how's that sound like as a little trade-off? I'm like, oh, that's a great deal. But in a way, it's kind of also a misnomer too. Like, so all of it should be about helping us get to heaven. Amen. And so don't let the money people or the finance people or the business people, you guys go over here and you take care of the business stuff, and then we'll take care of the spiritual stuff over here. I think we do have to stop that. It doesn't serve anybody. But I think there is a translation opportunity. Yeah. So a lot of our people who are formed theologically and spiritually and are spiritually mature don't understand business language.
Right.
And so sometimes business people can use that as a weapon to make them feel less than or inferior when it comes to making business decisions.
And when you say business language, when you say business language, what are you referring to? You're talking about spreadsheets, financial documents. What do you mean by business language?
Yeah, so the financials are probably the most common one.
Okay.
So yeah, to take a look at a balance sheet, to take a look at a income and expense statement. For many people, that's just a sheet full of numbers, and they don't understand what the things are, what the implications of them are.
Love it.
But business people can just naturally take a look at things and start talking about, the cash flow burn rate, or talk about the whatever it might be, different ratios. And people who have not been trained in that then feel lost and aren't following the conversation.
Right.
And so I don't know that's necessarily intentional. But then the same thing happens on the flip side. The business people who have not been formed in the language of the church, and then church leaders will start using language about deeper theological or spiritual ideas, and the business people can be lost. So both sides can use their language and the other person's lack of literacy as a weapon that I do think helps build up these walls and doesn't help build up the kingdom. So I think the role of being a translator and help people see how these two are really describing similar phenomenon is a huge opportunity for the sake of the work we're all trying to do.
Oh, that's so cool. And so how's Villanova's School of Business? How are you guys trying to address that? And what types of things are you doing that you feel is making a difference?
Yeah, so I think in service to church leaders, that's probably the biggest place. And so, we're an educational institution, so we have educational programs. We talk about in the Center for Church Management, we actually have a master's in the science of church management, which is like an MBA for people that work for churches. So awesome. We have lots of pastors, lots of business managers, lots of pastoral leaders, whether they're the DRE or the youth minister or the music minister, but they want to have more of an impact on the parish or diocese they serve. So they come get this degree, and it covers a lot of the same courses that you would cover in a typical MBA program, but it's all geared towards parish and diocesan life. So all the case studies, while you'll cover the principles of human resources, you'll do it in a parish situation. While you take a look at organizational management and culture and get the best theory, you'll apply it to your parish or church or apostolate. And so all the coursework there. So that's kind of the most significant. And it's a 2-year online degree, Ron. So we have students literally from around the world that participate in it. So I had a class last semester. I had one student who was a priest in Rwanda logging on at 2 a.m. in the morning, and had another student who was the business manager in North Pole, Alaska, logging in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But they were able to take class together through the benefit of virtual online learning.
That's crazy.
So that's our primary one. But then we also offer a number of, for people that aren't ready for or in need of a full 30 credit master's degree, we have a number of non-credit certificate programs. So we have a 12 module, 12 webinar certificate in church management for anybody in any leadership role in the church. We have one for leaders of Catholic schools. And we actually host each summer, we host a group of young clergy. So guys who are either in the 3rd or 4th year of theology or the first 5 years after ordination, come together for a week-long intensive program, a residency program. And thanks to the Lilly Endowment, we received a significant grant from them. They can come to that program at no cost. So it covers their travel and covers their expenses for it. And so it's a great chance to give them kind of how do you do the fundamentals of strategy and finances and HR, and do it all through the lens of Catholic social teaching and all through the lens of mission. So those are the primary things. And then we sponsor research is the other thing that we do. So some of the things we talk about those studies.
It's just so grateful to the Lilly Foundation. Boy, they've been generous. There's not a lot of secular companies that will get behind religious support, and they certainly do. So that is just so beautiful. Love that. So a couple things that's just so exciting. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So the church management course that you guys have. So if I'm a pastor listening to this, am I thinking to myself, okay, should I go? Is that one more thing I'm going to take on? Yes or no? And or can I send somebody else who's a key leader? Like who can go to that? And if I'm a pastor specifically, what should I be thinking, or what could I be thinking in terms of options and commitment and outcomes?
Yeah. So for a pastor, I mean, for the master's program, there are some priests who want that.
Sure.
And for who that level of education is helpful for them. So we probably have 20-25% of our students every year are clergy who are pastors. And if that fits for you and that's what you're looking for, it's a great program and it works. And so I think more so for pastors, if they do not have a base fluency in some of these management issues, I think the certificate program, either the one that's the 12 webinars, or if they're a newer pastor, the residency, if they can afford the week to come do that, the time to come do that, I think either one of those would give them nice, healthy grounding in it.
So the outcomes of those, if I'm hearing you correctly, and again, this gets me really excited because it's just so practical and it's very doable. I've coached priests who have done the master's programs, and what an impact it has, and it makes coaching a joy. I have no bishops who have masters in business, and again, they have a whole different perspective, so I absolutely see the value in that. And yet I've also been with pastors who in the finance meeting, as soon as the spreadsheet comes out, their eyes roll in the back of their head, and with earnestness they do everything they can to try to understand it, and they're completely lost. And so not helpful. I love what you said about how both groups, the pastoral people and the finance people, they can stay in their own area and they can be illiterate in both of those things. And the goal is, what if we weren't illiterate? Doesn't mean we have to be excellent at it, but it'd be nice to be able to speak the language. And so it sounds to me like that church management 12-week seminar and that 1-week intensive for young priests would be a great starting block, so that you'd finish that. I'm guessing I would leave that course or that experience and go, you know what, I actually get it. I understand the fundamentals, and now I can function in that meeting without looking like, they have.
I think it does. I think it gives. They're both courses that are excellent for the core literacy that you would need.
Mm.
And we'll give you enough to know kind of the questions you should be asking and some of the basic stuff that you should understand. So yeah, we think they're great intros, and they're also great for any church leader, not just ordained ones.
Right. Yeah.
And then the ones that want to go further, I think the Masters is not for everybody, but for the ones that really want to take those on. And I think the other thing too, I just mentioned the Masters, which is kind of cool. I think the Masters long term, Ron, my own sense of it is like the parishes that I see that are really thriving tend to have, and again, this is anecdotal, this is like a study I'd love to do someday.
Yes.
But they have a pastor who has a zeal for souls, and that pastor usually has a right-hand person who's helping them run the shop.
Amen.
And kind of like a COO type who also has a zeal for souls, but has the competency to do all those things.
Yes.
So I see the 80% of our students who are lay students in the master's program as kind of the ones who can be that for parishes and for dioceses and whatever their particular pastoral expertise is, but they can take care of making sure that the operations of that parish are done at a really high level, an exceptional level, and a level worthy of the gospel. So that's kind of what I see long term. So again, not to exclude anybody, but just kind of where it probably plays out given all the things going on, the trends in the church longer term.
I love that. One of the churches or dioceses that I coach, their finance person is equally passionate about the mission of the diocese and the souls and the people and being a team player. And yes, he's also really competent and good in the area of finance and business management, but he is no less committed and no less of a team member in every other area. And what I love about what I'm seeing there is that Bishop is more than happy to send them to events and activities that are going to grow him on both sides of that equation. And so the commitment, the quality of contribution he brings to conversations and decisions is outstanding. And so it's like, and that's what you're talking about. It's just so fun.
Well, that's the thing too. Yeah. And like the coursework is not just the finance and HR and strategy, but they also take a course in like church history, so ecclesiology and Christology, and they get a course in canon and civil law. So it's always kind of bringing the integration and, again, trying to increase the fluency of people in both the language of the church and the language of business. And I think that's part of the reason it's been so helpful for so many people. And then they can go for and help their churches more effectively.
I love that. And so when you see the people that are coming through the business school, I just want to pull back a little bit, that are coming through the business school, what are they doing post degree? Like, are they, do you have an area that's dedicated to finance? Do you have an area that's like, where are they going? What are they doing?
Yeah. So our general students coming out, our biggest pool of students are finance majors.
Gotcha.
Who go out and become investment bankers or venture capitalists or other things. So we produce a ton of those for the world. We also have a huge accounting program here. So a ton of CPAs, and most of the big four accounting firms are going to have a lot of Villanova alums in there. And then a handful of other things. The other area that's been a growing area in business that we're actually intrigued to see how this will continue to impact the church, but is a whole area of data analytics. And so Villanova was kind of one of the early adopters in that. But that's having an impact on everything, and how that's leading into AI and all sorts of other areas, which, again, I think it's really important to have people form with a Catholic worldview in those spaces, because there's all sorts of crazy ethical questions that are coming up with how we use people's data and how we use people's information that are going to require responsible people to help businesses and companies navigate. So they go into a lot of different fields, and there's a bunch of entrepreneurial folks who start up their own things and create their own businesses and go and do some great stuff with that. It's a mix of things. I would say for our typical business school graduate, obviously our church management folks are working for churches. That's what they do.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to finance, one of the conversations that we had a while back, and I thought was so cool. There's some great movies. When it comes to the AI stuff, I think about the movie. My kids said, "Dad, have you watched Social Dilemma on Netflix?" I said, "No," and I
teach
did.
that with one of our courses. I teach that in our course.
Do you really? Yeah.
Ethics course.
It's fascinating. It's if any of our listeners haven't watched that yet, go get your kids to watch it too. It's an amazingly insightful movie that scares the daylights out of you, but it's actually happening in real time, and it's a real life experiment that's being lived out. But the whole finance, the world of finance. I know the big crash back, was it 2008 or that, boy, that was scary. And, just building, again, Netflix movie on that too. The shorts, what was it called? The Big Short. The Big Short. Yeah. Crazy cool movie. I don't know. But, again, there's a lot of breakdowns ethically in that world of finance going on without anybody knowing. And there's so much trust put in these institutions and these things that we often take for granted. And what are you seeing now that plagues the finance world, or not even plagues, but that's at risk, things that are happening that we need to keep an eye on, and things that,
Well, so it's kind of funny. I mean, there's a thing called SPACs now as a new instrument. Special interest, I forget what they're called, but they're basically where people put money into a fund with the expectation that fund will find and buy a company within 18 months. So it's totally speculative investing. And so, but it reminds me a lot of some of the tools in terms of the tranches of mortgages and mortgage-backed securities from 2008, where it's a very complex financial instrument that most people don't understand, yet they're pouring tons of money into it. So when I see things like that, that always kind of gives me pause. Right. Now, I've seen some SPACs do some great things.
Right.
I've got a buddy who actually had his company acquired, and they figured out, a great Catholic guy from UPenn, who figured out how to capture the gas coming off landfills and convert it into renewable energy. So they figured out the technology to do it. And they were able to use the investment from this growth they're now the largest producer of renewable energy, and they capture the toxic gas off of landfills and convert it in hundreds of landfills across it. So, I mean, these things can be used for good.
Yes.
But they also can be used as a pure tool for just what they used to call paper entrepreneurialism and just money without any connection to products or to people. So I think whenever those things are happening, that's always a cause for concern. And I think that's the big piece that we try and remind our students of. It's like, you can easily work in a spreadsheet and disconnect yourself from the people that are behind those numbers. Right. But to always remember that behind every number, there's a person. And so what is the impact on people of these transactions that you're doing? And always try and make sure that they're having some contribution towards the greater good.
Yeah.
And if we can keep that in mind, then I think we can be protected. But it's real easy. There's a lot of sophisticated tools out there that many people don't understand, that really, really bright people are creating.
Right.
And that can be dangerous if they're not managed ethically and responsibly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And greed is a crazy motivator that allows us that can take us down a really dark road. And we've certainly seen that multiple times. And if it's happened in the past, it's probably going to happen in the future. And so I love how you're forming people with that in mind, that character in mind, as they're studying and dreaming and hoping and planning for their future and their families and everything else, that, hey, money's not the only ingredient to your happiness and well-being for you and your family and your neighbors. It's all these other components. I hope that as people are listening to this, I hope they're parents that are listening to this that are going, my son, my daughter's going to be going in that direction. Why not consider Villanova as an option for education?
It's a great school. There are a lot of great schools that are out there, but I am. There's a reason we send two of our children to this school, Ron. So we know exactly what they're getting and are very pleased with it. It's been great for them as people and great for them from a faith standpoint too. So,
Matt, it's so fun to watch you transition from CLI and all the great work that you did there, and they continue to do great work.
They're still doing.
Aren't they? I think Dan's going to come on the podcast too. I was in touch with him recently, and we're going to connect.
Oh, excellent.
The bishops that I work with, a lot of them are working with CLI, and I just always so excited to hear that, because they do such important work. And I can't imagine they must be growing like crazy. The need for the work they do, the insights and the expertise they have is through the roof. And so it's cool, but so fun to see you to be where you're at, doing what you're doing, impacting and influencing the people you're influencing. It just brings me great joy. You're a wonderful guy. I just think the world of you.
No, thank you so much. No, it's a great blessing, Ron, and fun to continue to work with people like you in the whole vineyard of the Lord. So very grateful for that as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for listening again today. Again, if you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you would. That would be a big help. It's fun to continue to grow these conversations in parishes and dioceses and all over the place. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for following and sharing. Matt, thanks again for being with us today. God bless you on the work that you're doing.
Thanks so much, Ron. God bless you too. Have a great day.
I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.